So I thought this would be a good place to share with you the background and the context for this whole area, this whole trip, and what we're doing. And who the Qero are. This is my mesa. Most of you have worked with me now, so. But these cloths that we use for our mesa, these are traditionally the birth cloth of the Qero, okay? And if you're going to become a shaman, then you use it. So this is the cloth you're born, the baby comes into. If you're a shaman, you end up using it as your mesa cloth, your altar.
So your own particular one, your
yeah, and the ones that, so they also weave them now for us, modern urban Western shamans or whatever. But basically, that's the context behind it. And then we get our stones. So stones are a big part of the work. The stone people, you see stones everywhere because everything's conscious to shaman. Everything has life in it. There's no place where spirit is not. There's no inanimate objects to shaman. There's no separation of spirit and matter, or the masculine and feminine is not made hierarchical, where masculine's good, spirit's good, and matter's not so good, right? Instead, it's very much together. Nothing more spiritual than biology and nature, the way it seeks greater and greater complexity. And then these stones who've been around for a long time. This stone is called Uite, and it's from Greenland. It's the last place on the planet on the surface you can find what the Earth looked like 2.2 billion years ago. This is the whole planet looked like this when it was first formed. So it's a very old and wise stone, right? Now the shamans, the Qero, everywhere around the world, every culture, no matter where you're from, has always had shamans. There's always been somebody in the village who was born with the gift to see things, to figure things out, dialogue with nature and the non-physical worlds and all that kind of stuff, right? And do this work, this healing work, visionary work, storytelling, myth-making, all of that, right? And the Qero in particular were the shamans of this area from about 15,000 years ago, as far as history tells, as far as anyone knows. They were different tribes of people in this whole area. And the medicine people, the medicine women and men were the shamans, and so this was pre-Inca. And then the Inca Empire formed around 1100, where they started to bring the different tribes together and make it into an empire. But the Qero were still there, and it's feminine based. They're matriarchal. They're an earth-based kind of people. And little kitty. Anyway, so the Qero during that time of the Inca, they were also starting not to be treated so well because it was becoming a little more hierarchical in the empire, and then by around 1490, right, 1491. When the Qero were reading their prophecy, which they would throw coca leaves, they would be able to read the signs. They would see what's coming. And back then, what was important mostly was the weather. Is it going to rain? Is it going to be a drought? Should we grow corn? Should we, move the village? Should we do rain prayer? This time, when they were reading their prophecy, they saw that these half men, half beast were coming with skins of steel and thundersticks to turn their world upside down, which was Pizarro, the conquistadors who came on shore on horseback, half men, half beast, because they hadn't seen that before, and turned their whole mythology around. And our mythologies are our stories of origin. How do we get here? Why are we here? How did humanity start? What's it all about? Right? These are myths. These are stories. And their stories, like most indigenous people on the planet at that time, and just about everybody if you go back far enough, were feminine-based. They recognize it's the feminine that gives birth to everything. Nowhere does the masculine really give birth. It supports that process. But the jungles produce the new species, and the volcanoes produce new land. It's the Mother Earth that's constantly creating this ever-changing drama, this ever-changing life that we appreciate, right? And the sun is the father, Inti Taita, that shines warmth and light and heat to make it possible, but isn't in charge. Doesn't say, you need a new jungle over here and you better cap that volcano. I don't like that, right? It just lets it go. And and that it's still going. It's not finished. It's still changing and evolving, right, as we observe today. And the conquistadors came and said the opposite. They said, nope, says here, page 2, in the one and only story that's true, Genesis, right, that we've been cast out of the garden. It's the thorns and thistles. It's not here. It's not mangoes and papayas. It's a horrible place, and it's a woman's fault for tasting the fruit of knowledge and power, right? And the feminine is born from the masculine. So it's completely, they called it the Pachacuti, the world turned upside down, right? Because it was a different story altogether. And that it was finished on the 6th day, nothing you can do about it except get what you need from your neighbor, which means battle. And so Qero, having seen that this antagonistic relationship to the feminine was being spread all over the planet on these great ships, right, decided to isolate. That's when they left. They went to 18,000 feet in the Andes outside of Cusco, 3 days journey on horseback. Al's been there. It's very difficult to get there if you can even handle the altitude or even find it. And they, so that their subsequent generations wouldn't inadvertently buy into the new story, and the men would sort of take over and the women would be pushed aside, and we'd end up, kind of where we are, which is battle and poverty and unsustainable living and the treating of the earth and women and all that kind of stuff. So they just wanted to hold on to the original myths because they knew we'd need them again someday. They knew this other story would end up sort of badly, because if you have an antagonistic relationship with the feminine, it leads to disease in the body. So this is feminine, man or woman, and if it's out to get us, it will. Whereas the Qero don't really do disease. Their body doesn't turn on them. They die deliberately, consciously when they want to, totally healthy. And it would lead to eventually big wars and the environmental collapse and all this kind of. So they knew that one day probably we would need to have that old wisdom back, untouched by these other stories and myths, which have now spread all over the planet. So that's why they left, and that's where they've been. And then about 60 years ago, they were reading their prophecy. They do it about every 10 years, and I've been with them a couple of times. Al's been with them. They saw that the Pachacuti was happening again. The world was turning right side up. The feminine was coming back into its value and power. And the warrior masculine approach was finished. It wouldn't work anymore. We'd do it the hard way by blowing everything up and realizing it didn't work, or we'd do it the easy way, which was what they called the round-eyed shamans from the north. They knew that in these villages of 20 million, like Los Angeles, there was people born every day that were shamans, like 1 out of 30 or 100 who had these gifts still. And if they could initiate them, if they could teach us, if they could help us to heal and regain this old way of doing things, the more gentle way, then we could turn the world back around more gracefully and gently. But they're unattached to it. They don't care about their culture. They don't care. It ended 500 years ago when they had to leave, as far as they're concerned. They're not worried about their villages in Qeros maintaining their way of living so much. They came out to say, here's what we've kept for you for 500 years. Here it is. Take it. Run with it. Do what you want. Maybe it'll help you. Maybe it won't. Maybe you'll blow yourselves up anyway. But we've done our bit. We're good. And they're very easy like that. You'll see when you meet them. They're just so completely unattached and childlike and playful. And so they've been doing this. They've been teaching because about my teacher Alberto Vialo, who I said, who was the first to meet them. He was a psychologist, medical anthropologist. He met them. He learned their ways. He spread it through the four winds all around the world. There's people from every country who are mesa carriers like this, and they're working on people like I do every day to make the woundings that happened from the warrior masculine approach of the last 500 years, to heal, so that we could step back to the feminine, back to the more powerful approach to living and to treating the earth and so on and so forth, and making good decisions. And we're all aware of that. We're all aware of how things could be better. You can have a battle, or you could give them food, and chances are if you give them food, they'll love you and everybody's happier. You could spend all that money on battle and it just perpetuates more, right? So the warrior masculine approach obviously doesn't work. And it's changing, so now is the time. Now it's happening. Whether you want it or not, whether you're whether you're conscious of it or not, whether you do it deliberately and gracefully through your own healing work or not, it's going to happen. It's sort of an inevitable, natural thing. When things get out of balance, right? When there's too many algae in the pond, they eventually die of their own waste, and then the pond is clear again. So this is all happening. It's just a question of how do we handle it personally, and that's what the shaman's work is. That's what our work is in the world today. And you'll see through the Qero. I mean, you're hearing it from me, but I wanted you to get a sense of who you're meeting tomorrow, because we're going to sit in ceremony that if you go to the museum in Cusco or Lima, they show you an old despacho, it's called, an old ceremony where they bring gifts and put it in paper, and then they fold it up and bury it, and you blow prayers into it, and they return it to the earth. It's to give back and stuff like that. And they've been doing it for, as far as we know, 15,000 years, and we're going to do it tomorrow just like they did it then. It's like we're stepping back 500 years tomorrow. And this is what the Inca looked like. This is the stuff they wore. You'll see their ponchos. There's pictures.
There's Chino right there.
Yeah, so
There's Don Francisco and Chino.
Right, so here's Chino. Here's Don Alberto and Bernardina, the first I met, and Don Francisco. These are the ones I worked with since the day one of my travels here. And then Alberto, my teacher, and he's with his teacher. This is the guy, Don Manuel Quispe. He was the one who initiated Alberto, who held the tradition. He was like the Dalai Lama of the Qero. He was the main dude, and he just died a few years ago at age 99. He just, see ya, and beautiful man, very, very cool. Anyway, so he's the one that, being kind of the skeptical engineer type that I am, I need to see things, results, to really believe it. I don't just buy into anything. But when I started doing this work, the results were so amazing that I couldn't deny it. And then things like Don Manuel Quispe showing up in people's dreams and telling them to come get a session. A year ago this happened to two different people, one in Ohio and one in Washington. And they saw his picture and they go, yeah, that was the guy. That was the guy. He showed up in my dream and he said, go work with, so-and-so. In this case, it was me. But he does this for whoever, right? And it's like that kind of stuff's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's been my experience with these Qero since I started working. And I've worked with the guru traditions. I've been to India. I've seen powerful people manifest things out of thin air and that kind of thing. And nothing more sort of engaging than these Qero shamans. They show up like you could decide you want a session with me, and I can only see you 3 weeks from now, and you'll start getting worked on before we even get together. That's how eager they are to help us, just to help us, get as free and in our power as we can get, to have more of the experiences we want with less of the ones we don't want, around health, relationship, work, money, world peace, whatever. So yeah, I think that's I don't know if there's any questions about that, but I wanted to give you that background because that's the story. That's what's happening in the world at large, if you haven't noticed already, this sort of, because as things turn over, as there's sort of this change, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of turmoil. I'm sure when bronze first was invented and discovered, the stonemasons probably freaked out, like we're going to be out of business, right? So I think a lot of the warrior masculine who have thrived on this sort of hierarchical system and suppression of the feminine and everything are kind of worried now. What are they going to do when that's not the story, when that's not the way the world works anymore? And I think we're seeing a lot of that fear come up, and that's what's happening. That's why. This has been in the prophecy. And it's not just the Qero prophecy. This is the Hopi prophecy. This is the Mayan prophecies. This is the Judeo-Christian prophecies, the return. Because they say after this Pachacuti, there'll be a millennium of gold, right? 1,000 years of peace. Same story. After the return of the Messiah, there's 1,000 years of peace. And that's what that means. It's the return of the feminine, the more kind of wild, untamable, yielding way of approaching life, not the warrior masculine, which is, if we just kill enough of them, we'll be okay, right? Because you can't. You can never kill enough of people that bother you if you're playing victim to that. In order to be in your power, you don't give your power to somebody else's behavior. You just, decide what you prefer to experience, and then it turns. And so that's the healing process is a big process of shedding the old wounds, shedding the ancestral way of doing things, typically the battle, the warrior, doing shadow work, which is to embrace parts of you that you're doing war with in battle. Ooh, that's bad, I don't want to be that, and that sends a signal that attracts more of that into your life. And the only way to stop them, because you can't kill enough of them, is to embrace that in you and love the violent, or love the whatever liar or cheater or whoever that is, the jerk, whatever that part of you is that you're going, oh, I don't want to be that. As soon as you embrace it and love it as a human in terms of your experience here in the theater, you stop running into that out here. It goes away. So it's actually an extremely powerful way to improve your quality of life, is to do this shadow work. So that's the healing process that we go through, that we were taught by the Qero.
Is that Jon?
Yeah.
Chino?
Okay. Chino, ¿cómo estás? Like that. They're sort of like, our goal is not to protect ourselves.
Namaste.
Right. Our goal is not to
Yeah.
They're not here to protect themselves. They're here to serve humanity at large. And the only way that all the world problems, poverty, war, children, education, you name it, all these things stem from this funky mythology, from the fact that we don't do that anymore, right?
Is that me?
No.
Their village is so remote that to even go there and even to be against them, nobody wants that land. They don't want to go there.
But I get the gist of your question. The question is that, why would they not protect the whole thing? And that's because, again, it wouldn't do any. It was like Al was saying before. They could live. 18,000. It's not easy. It's not an easy life, number one. But even if they were to maintain their own culture and all that kind of stuff, and the world still went to hell, what good is it? They know better. They know it doesn't do us a damn bit of good to be all protected and living right up here when 7 billion other people are. There's only 2,000 of them today, and only 50 have come out of isolation, and there's only about a dozen of them that are shamans. There's not a whole lot that they need to. They did that for that reason, to actually save what we knew we would need when it got really bad. When we got to that point where it's like, can we keep doing this? They came out of isolation and said, here's a better way. Take it. We kept it for you for 500 years. Take it. If you do, we'll all be back in the garden. Because they also know they come back. It's multiple lifetimes, right? So it's not like any one of them is really dead or gone. It's like if we can get all of humanity living in harmony and with the feminine and all that kind of stuff, then as they reincarnate, they're going to be super happy, because that's the deal, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So preserving their life now is not important compared to that bigger picture. Yeah, it's a broad perspective. It's a 1,000-year perspective. Dame Wakiste would say, we're not just training shamans, we're growing gods. Meaning we're trying to get people so free and in their power that they're playing like children in the sandbox. They're playing in the planet the way it was originally meant to be, where we dream our world into being, where we think of something and create it, and we play together, and we participate. There's still contrast, pleasure, and pain, but it's not the state we've gotten ourselves into, right? Which is the only way I'll be happy is if I attack you that are coming after what I got, that kind of thing. So, yeah. Does that make sense? Sort of? Yeah, because they did. They protected.
We always think also of, like with indigenous people, we think of how we want. Maybe or much of my upbringing has been like we have to protect them, and you're turning it around on me that they're actually protecting us, and so it's a change of perspective.
Oh, this flips everybody's perspective over typically. Yeah, this is something most people have never heard. And it was true for me. I read all the books, I did all the other practices, and then I came to this. I'm like, oh, okay. Whoa, I get it. And most of the other indigenous cultures, unfortunately, have been almost genocided, right? I mean, they've been through the
Well, that's
wounded.
why the protection thing comes in.
They didn't get isolated. The only other ones, there's the Shuar and the Ach, some people deep in the Amazon that weren't affected by the missionaries and stuff, and then the Mache shamans of Chile that I talked about, the women who fought the conquistadors off and then isolated themselves. So they're still kind of holding the original way as well. But that was then. Now it's not about protecting. It's too late. You know what I mean? A lot of even the indigenous and Native Americans, for example, because of the genocide, because of the influences, they don't hold the full unwounded way of being like they do. You know what I mean? It's been undercut. And I know this for a fact because there's some very powerful Native American, medicine people who grew up on the reservation who thought they had that all figured out, came to the training and went, oh my God, I thought I knew it all. It turned them upside down too. Like, oh, this is the deal. It's not about reclaiming our way of life from the white people. It's more about white people to keep it's more about we need to get everybody. We need to if you know what I mean. Not if all of humanity doesn't eventually turn over, it's futile. We just keep having reservations and conflict. So it's a bigger picture, which is why I like to talk about it, because it puts a lot of things in context and perspective, right? It's like it gives you some understanding of your own personal life and the masculine feminine relationships you're in between your mind and your body, and is this always in control, or is this being allowed to manifest and this serve that? You know what I mean? Like there's internal, and then there's our relationships with our spouses, with our friends. It's everywhere that this warrior, masculine has dominated the feminine, and yet the feminine is eminently more powerful if it wasn't divided and conquered. If they didn't turn women against each other, this kind of thing. And so the whole trick here is to get the feminine back such that the masculine then comes, at the feet of the feminine and serves with courage. I use the analogy of the volcano in the jungle. A truly courageous man or masculine will come to the base of a volcano that's erupting and not try to figure out how to cap it to feel safe. Ooh, if it erupts on me, I'm going to hurt. So let's suppress it, let's cap it, let's keep you suppressed so I feel safe. That's the non-courageous warrior masculine, the fearful masculine. The courageous masculine comes to the volcano and goes, wow, that's beautiful, look at the new land it's creating. And yeah, it might erupt on me, but that's no reason to stop that. That's true for men and women. It's true for all aspects of the masculine and feminine. The feminine should be allowed to be wild and untamable, and the masculine should have the courage to support that.
Embrace it.
And not go, no, don't do that. That scares me. Yeah. And that's happening again internally. It's our own. Most of the time we identify with our mind, so we say I'm this or I'm that or I'm scared. I always say no. It's your frontal lobe that's protesting what your heart's wanting. Your heart knows that's the thing to do, and your mind's going, no, don't do it. That could be hurtful, dangerous. Don't, It's the little boy going, ah. But the big girl's going, no problem, I got this, And if we allowed that part of us to have the courage to follow the heart, then you'd see there'd be a lot better things going on in the world, I think. So, anyway, any other questions about all that, or thoughts, or sharing? So when I do sessions, for people in the Qero, I do it the same way that I was taught and stuff like that. It's really a very quick and gentle and easy way to clear whatever wounds happen because we suppress the feminine. When we're not suppressing the feminine within us, we're allowed to cry, scream, yell, process things fully when we feel pain, loss, abandonment, abuse, neglect, engulfment. The 6 painful human experiences. When we experience those, if we cry and scream and yell, the heavy energy goes out our first chakra into the earth and gets mulched, and we're over it. We don't carry it with us. We remember it, but we don't. But when we block that and we say, don't cry, don't get angry, I don't want to hear it, be a man, suck it up, don't be a woman, that's all bad, this from here down is bad, only this is good, then we create these heavy patterns of loss, betrayal, abandonment, abuse, and then they just keep manifesting that same experience over and over. So when I do my healing work, I'm just the stones are pulling like an energetic enema. What should have gone out your first chakra, it just pulls it. Like the ayahuasca, right? We're dumping it, you can see how they now very similar, right? The heavy energy is being released. But if you'd already released it the moment it happened, you wouldn't have to release it with things like ayahuasca or my sessions. My job is to put myself out of business. If we all get to a place where we're free and empowered and like children again, where we live in the world and we cry and we scream when things are painful and we just get over it, then there's no healing necessary anymore. We're all just doing it, we're just living. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the ultimate goal, but you could see that there's a ways to go. In other words, there's not enough, people doing that work, and there's other ways to do it. There's harder ways to do it, which is through acts of power, or like leaving a situation, or you can do it that way. It just takes a little longer. And the Qero came to get it done quicker, if possible, and more graceful, more easy, more gentle. Yeah. Anyway, but they're also like, and it doesn't matter. It's okay if you don't. No skin off our backs. We'll get there eventually. You know what I mean? It's like whether it's 80 years or 1,000 years doesn't make much of a difference in a 2 billion year, time span, right? So it's kind of funny.
So there's really no sense of time then in shamanism.
Not so much, right? But time is much more non-linear, to shamans. I mean, linear time's convenient in the theater where your house is built when you go home and you don't pop back 40 years earlier accidentally. So it's useful in the theater. It's most practical and pragmatic. Shamanism's designed to help that be as much as you like. But when it comes to like perspective and looking at these things, it is nice to have a broad time frame. So you're not, anxious, like, I got to make it happen tomorrow, or, And I get a good example of this. A lot of people come to the training, and one of us will notice that they have an issue, that they're dealing with something like an energy or an entity that's attached to them that's causing problems, and they're like, well, get it out, get it out. If that's, as soon as they hear about it, it's like, get it out now. And it's like, well, you've been living with it for 40 years, so call me in a month. What difference does another month make? You know what I mean? But our awareness of it is what causes that sort of, how can I live with this now? But see, the shamans, it's much more like, it's no big deal. You could wait another month. It's going to be all right. A year. It's not going to make much of a difference. So it is. The Qero have a saying it's about mastery of time is what we're talking about. When Don Manuel was with Alberto on the Altiplano, looking out over the Andes, and he said to Alberto, he goes, you Westerners are funny. You own your land, but time owns you. Got to get it done tomorrow, deadline. If you don't do it, everything falls apart. Your world's over, right? They go, we're caretakers of the land, but we own time. Why do today that which will take care of itself in 3 or 4 days? Why bust yourself let it unfold, And it works. Because the universe makes you right. If you're going to die tomorrow, if you don't do it, you will. If you know it'll get taken care of in 3 or 4 days, it will. It's up to you which one of those you want to buy into. Which of those myths do you want to be your myth? One's nicer than the other, typically.
Earlier you were talking about along the lines of quantum physics. Remember we were talking about certainty? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like with certainty's kind of cool in the theater, but ultimately it can get you in trouble if you have to have it. If you're okay being like, well, I don't know. We call it being comfortable with the unknown and the unknowable. It's like going into the jungle and being comfortable. You don't know what's going to happen. But you can really enjoy it if you just let go of that need to know. If I go down that trail, will I get eaten, or will I find something beautiful? Who knows? Can you be comfortable with that? That's the feminine. That's the untamable, wild feminine.
the incredible challenge of combining living in Western culture with that timeline of, and you have to pay your mortgage.
Because we're in, right. So this is why...
So it's not going to take care of itself in 4 days.
I know.
If you don't do it by this certain time.
Well, we're in the Pachacuti. All of that is a result of the upside down for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so that has momentum. That's not going away tomorrow unless we blow it up tomorrow, right?
Right.
Someone hits the button. But basically, so the challenge is to understand this, to do your work, and then to also function within the world, not disappear to a mountaintop or an ashram. You could check out, that's fine, but the Qero, when we first met them, when I first walked in the door and saw Don Umberto and Donna Bernardina, they went like this. And we went like, wow, like, look at you. And they're like, look at you. They're like, it's easy for the most part where we live. We're isolated. We don't have to deal with all your mortgage crap, right?
Right.
You're amazing that you are powerful as you are, all of you.
And pay your mortgage.
And find a way to pay your mortgage. That just blows their mind. How do you do it? It's insane. So they are very impressed by us. They think we're like the most amazing beings that we chose to